The silence was absolute. For a moment, it felt like time itself had paused, the world holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Then, suddenly, it all shattered, like glass splintering beneath the weight of an invisible force. The digital realm, once so resilient and dependable, crumbled in a heartbeat. Emails froze mid-sentences, encrypted messages unraveled into meaningless gibberish, and the endless flow of data, images, videos, financial transactions, died a sudden death. A flicker of confusion darkened every screen, every device that once thrived on constant connection. Panic set in like a cold wave, sweeping through the streets and into the minds of millions who depended blindly on what they believed to be secure and unbreakable. It was as if an unseen hand had pulled the plug on the entire digital infrastructure, leaving behind only chaos and unanswered questions. Citizens stared in disbelief at their devices, desperately trying to access their emails, their bank apps, their social networks, only to be met with error messages and cryptic codes. The reality dawned quickly. They weren't just experiencing a malfunction. The core fabric of their digital security had revealed itself to be a fragile illusion. Encryption, long heralded as the shield protecting their secrets, their identities, their lives, had suddenly become a sieve, leaking everything. Across government servers, financial institutions, hospitals, every network that once pledged to safeguard data, alarm bells blared. But these alarms were drowned out by the mounting noise of confusion and fear. The authorities scrambled, their voices drowned in the chaos that grew with each passing second. Information was no longer to be trusted. Truths began to fracture under the weight of misinformation and suspicion. In this instant of upheaval, the very foundation of modern society was being tested. Where there once was order, now only disorder remained. The encryption keys, the unseen code that held the digital world together, had failed. Whether it was a sophisticated attack, a fault buried deep within the coding, or an unknown vulnerability long ignored, this collapse was raw and unyielding. It revealed the terrifying truth that beneath the veneer of security, there was an inherent vulnerability, a ticking time bomb that had just gone off. People on the streets looked up at the sky, clutching their devices as if they could will the digital gods to restore balance. But the signals withered, the servers went dark, and the digital whispers turned into screams. The fabric of interconnectedness, meticulously woven over decades, was now torn apart, exposing a vulnerable network of flesh and blood. No one could predict what would happen next. The hackers, the opportunists, the power-hungry, their shadows loomed larger now. Some saw the chaos as an opportunity for theft, for manipulation, for domination. Others, lost and desperate, clung to any semblance of control, even as their digital footprints disappeared into the void. As the dust settled momentarily in this new reality, the true horror dawned. The breakdown of encryption was not just a technical failure but a revelation. It unmasked the delicate illusion of safety, the idea that the digital world was infallible. The very security that people believed could protect them had grown obsolete in the blink of an eye. This was not a simple blackout, it was a fundamental unraveling, an exposé of the fragile, woven puzzle of bits and bytes that held society together. The chaos was only beginning, and beneath this chaos lay a dark truth waiting to be uncovered. How deeply connected, yet how perilously vulnerable, the world had become. The digital fortress had shattered, and what stepped out from the rubble was a landscape of fear, mistrust, and uncertainty. And with this collapse, the narrative of security was erased. The chaos was no longer an anomaly. It was the new reality, a terrifying mirror reflecting what happens when the very safeguards designed to protect us are turned against us, or worse, fail us in the most critical moment. The world had never prepared for a breach of such magnitude. What began as a whisper in the shadows of the digital labyrinth soon grew into a roar that echoed through every corner of society. It was as if an invisible virus had seeped into the core of our systems, quietly but relentlessly dismantling the fortress of encryption we once believed unbreakable. In the financial sector, the tremors were felt almost immediately. Dark screens flickered in trading rooms as algorithms, previously trusted to safeguard transactions, revealed alarming vulnerabilities. Banks, which prided themselves on bulletproof security, suddenly found their vaults of data exposed. Client funds, personal details, internal strategies, all laid bare in the chaos. Investors watched in horror as their assets became targets, manipulated or erased by unseen hands. The very foundation of trust that held the economy steady trembled, exposing how fragile our reliance on cryptography truly was. Across the healthcare landscape, the scenario grew even more distressing. Hospitals, once guardians of confidentiality, scrambled to regain control over patient information that had been compromised. Confidential records, diagnoses, medical histories, sensitive treatments, were no longer secure. The panic was palpable. Doctors and nurses witnessed their systems fail, critical data untreated or manipulated. Lives hung in the balance, not just from the malware that infiltrated their digital infrastructure but from the crippling loss of trust. Without secure communication channels, the delicate fabric of patient confidentiality unraveled, revealing how deeply we depend on encryption to protect lives. Meanwhile, governments worldwide found themselves overwhelmed by a surge of chaos and uncertainty. Critical infrastructure, defense, intelligence agencies, public services, had all become vulnerable. Sensitive diplomatic communications leaked into the public eye, threatening national security and disrupting diplomatic efforts. Emergency response systems were thrown into disarray, unable to coordinate effectively when vital data was compromised. The very fabric of social order was strained as citizens questioned whether their leaders could safeguard their lives and information. It became clear that the arteries connecting governance, security, and the populace were thinner than ever, only secured by the fragile promise of encryption. As the fallout continued to unfold, a disturbing truth emerged. We had become utterly dependent on encryption, so much so that its failure was akin to losing a part of our collective soul. The digital age had created a dependency so profound that many had stopped questioning its dependability. We lauded our technological advances, assuming security was impenetrable, a given. Yet when that security broke down, we saw the horrifying consequences: chaos, vulnerability, erosion of trust. The ripple effect was evident and relentless. One sector's collapse precipitated another's. Banks lost their clientele's faith. Hospitals struggled to heal without reliable data. Governments faltered in maintaining order. It was a mirror held up to our society's obsession with digital control, revealing how little room remained for error. Our digital lives had become interconnected and fragile, each link susceptible to attack, each fragility exposing the illusion of invincibility. This breach did more than expose lapses in cybersecurity. It revealed a fundamental flaw in our dependence on encryption itself. Up to this point, encryption was celebrated as the ultimate shield, the invisible guardian of our secrets. But as the walls crumbled, it became painfully evident that no technology, no matter how advanced, is foolproof. We had built our modern society on digital sands, trusting in a security architecture that, when compromised, could unravel everything. The fallout from this cascade of failures served as a stark reminder: technological reliance without resilience is a perilous game. It exposed the hubris of those who believed their systems could remain invulnerable, the naivety of societies that took encryption for granted. Every sector, finance, healthcare, government, was a piece of a larger puzzle. When one falls, the whole system risks collapsing, revealing vulnerabilities that cannot be hidden anymore. Our dependency on encryption had been a silent assurance, a safeguard against chaos. Yet, now, it was the very weakness that allowed chaos to seep through the cracks. The damage extended beyond data breaches, stripping away the sense of safety and control that underpins our organized societies. It was as if we had placed all our eggs in a basket that was vulnerable from the start, and when it cracked, everything shattered in the storm that followed. In this new landscape, the questions haunted us. How resilient are we really? Can we rebuild that trust once lost? Or are we doomed to remain forever exposed, vulnerable to the next breach lurking just beyond comprehension? The fallout from this failure wasn't just about lost data or disrupted services. It was a stark awakening, a mirror reflecting our deepest fears about our digital dependency. It underscored that, perhaps, in our race towards progress, we had forgotten the very foundation of security we thought unshakable. As the dust settled and the chaos ebbed into cautious investigation, the revelations endured. Each sector, each citizen, each government now painfully aware of its own fragility. The ripple effects revealed not just weaknesses in our defenses but also our collective illusion of invulnerability. The floodgates had opened, and in their wake, an unsettling truth remained. No system is invincible, and our trust must be earned anew, built from resilience, awareness, and humility in the face of our most vulnerable reliance, encryption. In the darkened corners of the digital universe, where the glow of screens flickers like the heartbeat of unseen shadows, chaos had become the new currency. It wasn't just about breaking into systems anymore, it was about reigniting a wildfire that would consume everything, revealing vulnerabilities so raw they left scars on the fabric of society itself. These cyber shadows, hackers with no allegiance but to chaos and profit, moved with ruthless precision, turning the chaos into an empire of exploitation. Across the globe, in a simple room lit only by the pulsating lights of multiple monitors, a figure leaned back in a chair, a quiet smirk playing on their lips. Their fingers danced over the keyboard, releasing a storm within the digital walls of a multinational corporation. Systems crashed and data spilled like blood, personal details, financial records, confidential communications, exposed and vulnerable, available for any who dug deep enough or dared enough to reach. This was the new reality. Vast data breaches had become commonplace, like outbreaks of a violent plague. Every day, hackers found new ways to pry open the vaults of those who believed their defenses were impenetrable. They exploited the chaos not just to steal identities or drain bank accounts but to sow discord, to destabilize nations, to reveal secrets they had no right to know, all in the name of chaos, and for the highest bidder. The scenes unfurled like a rapid montage. People holding their phones, frantically checking their accounts, news stations blaring headlines about millions of identities compromised, families devastated as their personal lives were dragged into the spotlight of a relentless digital invasion. The world was caught in a web spun by invisible hands, hands that belonged to those who thrived in the shadows, whose motives ranged from greed to ideological fury, from malicious entertainment to calculated political sabotage. And yet, amid this digital upheaval, a new battle was brewing, a war not fought with bullets or bombs but with codes, algorithms, and masterful manipulation of the virtual landscape. Hackers, notorious and anonymous, wielded their skills like swords, carving paths through firewalls, spreading chaos, and reaping profit from the unfolding disaster. They understood that in this era of information warfare, control of data meant control of influence, power that could shift the balance of nations, cripple economies, or ignite social unrest. The camera pans to a clandestine meeting of cybercriminals, faceless and masked, exchanging snippets of malicious code, plans for their next big breach. Their laughter echoes through encrypted conference channels. These are the architects of chaos, the spiders that weave networks of destruction designed not just for personal gain but for the thrill of upheaval itself. Their exploits are slick, calculated, almost artistic in their precision, except that the art they create is one of despair. Meanwhile, authorities scramble to keep pace in this invisible war. Cybersecurity experts pore over lines of code like detectives unveiling a crime scene, trying to trace back the origin of each breach, each sabotage. But the hackers are cunning, adaptable, shifting tactics with each failed attempt. Their exploits evolve like a living organism, becoming more sophisticated, more dangerous. This chaos has unleashed a new era, one where digital sovereignty is under siege, where trust in institutions erodes as personal information becomes a commodity traded in the shadows. Every breach reminds us painfully that our digital lives are fragile, vulnerable to those who see them as treasure chests to be pilfered. It ignites a primal fear that we no longer control the narrative of our own identities, our secrets exploited and exposed in ways we can never fully comprehend or undo. The headlines, once mere stories, have become warnings etched into collective consciousness. Our data isn't safe. It's a battlefield, a pawn in a game beyond our understanding, manipulated by unseen puppeteers. And within this chaos, a question lingers: who truly holds the power? The hackers? The corporations? The governments trying to patch the leaks? Or the silent watchers? Those lurking in the digital shadows, waiting for their moment to strike? The scene shifts again, revealing a secret operational room, where a team of cyber investigators traces suspicious activities. The tension is palpable, each keystroke a potential revelation. But they are always a step behind, chasing ghosts in the machine, fighting not just for data, but for the integrity of a world that's slowly losing its grip on control. This eruption of chaos isn't random. It's a deliberate attack, a strategic ploy, revealing the cracks and vulnerabilities of a society obsessed with connectivity but blind to the dangers lurking beneath the surface. The hackers exploit that very obsession, knowing that in a world where everything is linked, everything is vulnerable. And so, as the digital storm rages on, the quiet realization grows. We are entering a new epoch, one where information is power, but also a weapon. An era where chaos isn't just an incidental byproduct but the mechanization of a new war. A war for control over the very fabric of our reality. The lines between friend and foe blur, as everyone becomes a potential target or an unwitting accomplice in a game that has no rules, only victims. In this relentless saga of shadows and secrets, the question remains: how much longer can we keep the darkness at bay? Or are we all just waiting in the shadows, helpless, as the chaos engineers carve out their dominion? Amidst the crumbling facade of digital safety, the battle for control intensifies, with each breach a reminder. In this new world, chaos is not just a tool, it's the ultimate weapon. In the dim glow of their clandestine room, shadows flickered across the walls as data streams flickered across screens, classified documents, military plans, diplomatic cables, all spilled into the open like a floodgate burst. It's as if the walls themselves are trembling, protesting the vast chaos unleashed within them. The silence is deafening, broken only by the rapid clicking of keys and the heartbeat pounding in the ears of those who've risked everything to bring the truth into the light. The world awoke to the tremors of betrayal. Governments, once cloaked in secrecy, now exposed. What was meant to be buried deep within classified archives now sprawled openly across global networks. An exposé so profound, it threatens to upend the very foundations of international order. Secrets of military strategies, carefully guarded over decades, plans for covert operations, weapon arsenals, intelligence tactics, lay bare for enemies and allies alike to scrutinize and exploit. Diplomatic cables revealing clandestine negotiations, hidden alliances, covert influence pacts. These fragments of trust shattered in the span of a few devastating hours. The moment this information became public, chaos cascaded like an unstoppable storm. In every government office, a frantic scramble ensued. The clock raced against the inevitable fallout. Officials, once steady and composed, now moved like actors caught in a relentless play of damage control. Scripted responses were prepared, but none could stem the tide of turmoil. Satellite images of strategic military bases, maps of nuclear arsenals, and strategic discussions. These, now in the hands of enemies, became weapons of their own. The very knowledge that once held the pillars of national security steady now threatened to crumble them entirely. Across the globe, alliances strained and fractured. Trust was shredded into pieces, leaving behind a landscape ripe for chaos. Countries accused each other of vulnerabilities, retaliatory threats echoed through diplomatic channels, and the specter of open conflict loomed larger than ever. The delicate dance of diplomacy, based on secrecy and mutual benefit, turned into a desperate ballet of lies and deception. Governments pulled every lever, closing embassies, restricting intelligence sharing, imposing draconian censorships, yet the damage was done. The damage that no legal safeguard could contain, no military intervention could undo. The leakers, shadowed figures cloaked in mystery, watched with a quiet sense of grim satisfaction. Their actions had ignited a Pandora's box no one knew how to close. Was this a calculated act of whistleblowing or a destabilizing strike by a foreign adversary? The lines blurred. What motives hid behind such chaos? Was it revenge, ideology, or simply chaos for chaos's sake? As the world teeters on the brink of instability, new power dynamics begin to emerge. States that once relied on secrecy now face the uncomfortable truth. Information is fragile, trust is fragile, and the balance of power can tilt with a single disclosure. Some nations see opportunity in the upheaval, eager to exploit the chaos to expand their influence, while others scramble to reinforce their battered defenses, desperately trying to rebuild lost trust and control. The old order, built on covert operations and clandestine diplomacy, shows cracks, revealing a vulnerability that no security protocol could ever truly protect. In the midst of this turmoil, spies and intelligence agencies grapple with their shattered illusions. Their methods, once precise and layered in secrecy, now exposed, are thrown into disarray. The lines between ally and enemy blur as allies suspect each other of complicity or neglect. Espionage takes on a new perilous dimension, betrayals are uncovered, double agents exposed, and the very concept of trust becomes a weapon wielded with lethal precision. And yet, amid the chaos, there's a deeper, more insidious truth. This breach isn't just about exposing secrets. It's about revealing the fragile thread that holds the fabric of global diplomacy. It exposes how fragile national security really is in the age of information. What was once hidden away in secret vaults is now in the hands of anyone with a connection, a laptop, a reckoning. The international stage begins to morph into a battlefield, not of armies, but of information, influence, and deception. Countries now face the reality that their most vital secrets are shields no longer, they're vulnerabilities. The fallout from the leaks ripples outward, disrupting market economies, destabilizing governments, and igniting new conflicts that threaten millions. Some nations declare state of emergency, imposing draconian controls, desperate to contain the chaos, while others quietly watch, waiting for the dust to settle or for opportunities to arise from the upheaval. The humans behind the chaos, the leakers, the insiders turned enemies, are no longer mere whispers in the corridors of power. They are catalysts of change. Their actions echo in the halls of power long after the immediate fallout, forever altering the landscape of global politics. Their motives, a mixture of ideology, greed, revenge, are overshadowed by the realization that they've unleashed something unstoppable. As the dust begins to settle, if it ever will, the world finds itself at a new crossroads. The old paradigms of secrecy, trust, and diplomacy lie in ruins. What will rise from the ashes? Will new alliances be forged on the basis of transparency and mutual understanding, or will the chaos breed retribution, oppression, and revenge? The scars of these breaches will linger long after the headlines fade. And in the shadows, unseen and silent, new players gather, state and non-state actors, hackers, strategists, each aware that the game has changed forever. The balance of power is shifting, and no one can predict what form the new geopolitical landscape will take. One thing is certain: the age of absolute secrecy has come to an end, replaced by a volatile world where trust is a fragile illusion and information is the deadliest weapon. The echoes of their secrets, once erased, now reverberate through history, a warning and a curse for generations to come. The cold dawn broke over a city that never truly slept, yet today, it seemed to hold its breath. Skyscrapers, once symbols of progress and prosperity, now cast long, ominous shadows over the streets below. Inside the gleaming glass walls of a corporate fortress, chaos was brewing, silent and deadly. In a small, dimly lit conference room, the flickering glow of multiple screens reflected off the faces of overworked analysts and frantic executives. Confidential data, once guarded fiercely behind firewalls and encryption, had been compromised. The breach was more than just a digital leak. It was a rupture in trust, a breach that would ripple through the hearts of consumers and stakeholders alike. The footage revealed stolen trade secrets, formulas, strategic plans, proprietary algorithms, being circulated freely across the dark web. Sensitive customer information, details that had been entrusted to these corporations in good faith, lay exposed, raw and vulnerable. This was no ordinary cyber attack. It was an assault on the very fabric of corporate integrity, designed not just to disrupt, but to destroy. As the hours dragged on, walls of denial crumbled, and the reality became undeniable: businesses were losing their armor. Where once they wielded control, they now found themselves exposed, fighting to contain the damage amid a tide of panic. For many, the fallout was swift: recalls, lawsuits, plummeting stock prices, the erosion of consumer confidence. The trust that had taken years, decades, to build was melting away in a matter of moments. Across the cityscape, in offices and homes, people watched the unraveling unfold. Consumers, suddenly aware of the fragility of their personal data, grew anxious, angry. They demanded answers, accountability, transparency, promises of better safeguards. The digital age, which had promised convenience and connection, now seemed more like a trap that had unleashed unseen enemies lurking behind screens. The fight to adapt began immediately. Companies scrambled to patch vulnerabilities, to restore security measures, to reassure their clients. But repair was not enough. Many were forced to confront harsh truths. Their reliance on technology and globalization had been their Achilles heel. The infrastructure that sustained their operations was fragile, susceptible to a new kind of warfare, one that could crumble empires overnight. Meanwhile, some corporations took a darker turn. In their desperation, they resorted to espionage, misinformation, and even clandestine negotiations to salvage what remained of their empires. Others simply capitulated, filing for bankruptcy, their brands tarnished beyond recognition. The once competitive landscape was now a desert of forsaken brands and shattered ambitions. But not everyone succumbed. There were those who fought back, innovators seeking to forge new defenses, regulators pushing for stricter laws, consumers demanding better protections. Yet, even these efforts often felt like band-aids on a festering wound. The core issue remained. The delicate balance between privacy and power had been irrevocably tipped, and the repercussions extended far beyond the corporate corridors. In shadows and back alleys, whispers of underground markets grew louder. Stolen data changed hands like currency, fueling black markets and fueling paranoia. The very idea of privacy was slipping away, digit by digital digit, replaced by a pervasive sense of vulnerability. Humanity, once confident in the sanctity of personal boundaries, now faced a relentless invasion of its most intimate moments. As the chaos unfolded, a collective realization took hold. This was more than a corporate crisis. It was a mirror reflecting society's own vulnerabilities, exposing the thin veneer of control we believed we had over our digital existence. A haunting question lingered. How many secrets had we sacrificed at the altar of progress? How many unseen eyes were watching, waiting to strike? And so, in the aftermath of devastation, the fight was no longer just for corporate survival, but for the soul of privacy itself. The battlefield was no longer confined to firewalls and encryption but had expanded into every home, every device, every heartbeat connected to the invisible web of modern life. People's fears morphed into resolve. They would adapt or be erased, their identities and histories laid bare before an unforgiving digital storm. As the chapter closed on this day of reckoning, one thing was certain. The world would never be the same. The echoes of that breach would resonate for generations, whispering reminders of a time when trust was broken, secrets spilled into the abyss, and the fragile veneer of privacy finally shattered, transforming the landscape forever. And yet, amid the ruins, a flicker of defiance blossomed, an awareness that in the shadows of loss lay the seed for rebellion, the roots of resilience. The private sector, battered but not defeated, would rise again, molded by the trials it had endured. But the scars would serve as a constant reminder. Some secrets, once exposed, can never be truly erased. The streets are alive with chaos, a cacophony of frantic voices and hurried footsteps echoing through the city's veins. People clutch their phones like lifelines, eyes darting with suspicion, scanning every shadow for signs of the unseen threat. Everywhere, beneath the blaring sirens and shouting crowds, a rip opens in the fabric of social order, an unspoken fear that the digital world, once our greatest shield, has turned into our greatest predator. Mass paranoia spreads like wildfire, ignited by rumors swirling on every screen. A small rogue video, taken from a hidden corner of the internet, flickers into millions of feeds. Images of supposed government surveillance drones, invisible in the sky, tracking every move, every whisper. People stop trusting even the most mundane things. Stores become fortresses, guarded not just by security cameras, but by barricades and armored police forces. No one feels safe anymore, because safety itself has become a fragile illusion. The idea that someone, somewhere, is watching, really watching, has shattered the very foundation of daily life. In the midst of this turmoil, protests erupt in every corner, crowds marching with desperate, angry chants, privacy or freedom. We're not your experiment. The streets are painted with slogans scrawled in spray paint and blood-red ink. They took everything. The authorities respond with force, but it only fuels the fire. Tear gas clouds the air, mixing with the despair of those fighting for their autonomy. The civil unrest isn't just about digital privacy anymore. It's about a society crumbling under the weight of betrayal and betrayal's shadows. Citizens retreat into their enclaves, barricading their homes and their minds. Neighbors, once familiar, now keep their distance, their eyes wary of anyone who might be an informant. Families gather in hushed whispers, whispering conspiracy theories. Was this exactly what the system wanted? To make us turn on each other, paranoid and broken? The streets are littered with discarded masks, both literal and metaphorical, revealing faces that no longer trust anyone, least of all those they once called protectors. The city's heartbeat ripples with unrest. News outlets, once reliable, now serve as battlegrounds of conflicting narratives. Some claim it's all a conspiracy, a way for the ruling elite to tighten their grip, while others scream that this is the inevitable price of progress. The digital fabric that once unified us now feels like chains tightening around our throats. There's an air of profound betrayal, as if the very technology meant to empower us has enslaved us instead. People stop sharing openly. Instead, whispers circulate in shadowed alleyways, secret meetings behind closed doors. Trust erodes as transparency becomes a myth, a relic of the past. The very fabric of society begins to fray at the edges, threads of social cohesion snapping under the strain of suspicion and fear. Schools, workplaces, public spaces, all transformed into zones of surveillance and suspicion. Children are told to stay indoors. Parents whisper cautions about strangers and digital spies. Every digital footprint now feels like a trap, a pathway for those who wish to see how far society can fall. Amid this upheaval, some, driven by desperation, try to fight fire with fire. Hackers, activists, and rogue engineers appear in the shadows, attempting to subvert the system from within, to regain some semblance of control. Their efforts are fraught with peril. Betrayed by even the smallest breach, they face the wrath of a fractured society, often at the cost of their own lives. The digital world that once connected us now feels more like a battlefield, a no-man's land where chaos reigns supreme. As the days bleed into nights, the collective consciousness of the city seems to fracture. The social contract, once taken for granted, now lies in ruins. Trust has dissolved, replaced by suspicion that cuts deeper than any physical wound. The government's promises of security have become hollow echoes, drowned out by the deafening sound of people's fears and anger. Every conversation is laced with paranoia. Who can you trust? Who's watching? Are you next? The fabric of societal cohesion is unraveling before our eyes, leaving behind a landscape of broken ideals and shattered dreams. The city, once vibrant and bustling, now teeters on the brink of an abyss, an overwhelming sense that the foundation of civilization itself might be crumbling into chaos. Here, amid the wreckage of trust and safety, society stands at a crossroads. Is this the inevitable outcome of a world obsessed with digital surveillance, a cautionary tale etched into the crumbling walls of our collective psyche? Or is there a flicker of hope, an ember waiting to ignite a new dawn from the ashes of betrayal? In these dark, tumultuous days, one thing becomes painfully clear. When trust in systems designed to protect us evaporates, chaos is not just a possibility. It becomes the new reality. A society that once thrived on the interconnectedness of digital networks now finds itself isolated, fragmented, and vulnerable. Its most sacred bonds shredded by the very technology that promised salvation. And as this new world unfolds, one thing echoes louder than ever before: the true cost of losing ourselves in the digital shadows. The world had become a tangled web of shadows, where digital whispers and silent algorithms no longer seemed sufficient to guard what was left. Nations and corporations, recognizing the growing darkness lurking behind every encrypted signal, scrambled to adopt new measures. Old-fashioned methods made a reluctant return: manual checks, human vigilantism cloaked in authority, against a backdrop of glowing screens and hurried whispers. They clung to these measures, hoping to hold the line. Meanwhile, cryptographers and cybersecurity experts raced to develop layered encryption techniques, evolving faster than the threats themselves. In hidden labs deep beneath cityscapes, researchers huddled over glowing monitors, their faces etched with determination and fatigue. They deployed cryptographic algorithms that once had been considered obsolete, various cipher schemes reanimated like ancient warriors summoned from silent graves. These measures, raw and imperfect, were meant to mask the sensitive data with an added layer of complexity, making infiltration a near impossible task for prying eyes. Yet, outside these walls, the world did not sleep. On the streets, security personnel in plain clothes performed manual checks with gritty precision, fingertips scanning ID cards, inspecting bags, questioning suspicious individuals with a cold, measured tone. Facial recognition cameras flickered and adjusted, trying to match faces in the crowd, only to be hamstrung when faced with forged IDs or disguise. Human eyes, trained in relentless, became the final border, a physical barrier in a digital age where isolation was no longer just about firewalls but about flesh and blood. But as the effort intensified, so too did the complexities. The more layers they added, the more the system seemed to strain under its own weight. Confusion brewed among the security agencies. Some questioned whether these old methods, manual vigilance, physical checkpoints, could keep pace with an enemy that now operated in the shadows of the digital ether. They became labyrinthine, cumbersome, often creating bottlenecks that compromised their own security posture. The initial hope that these measures could serve as a fortress faded into uncertainty. Meanwhile, the cryptographers pressed onward, crafting algorithms that used quantum-resistant techniques, complex key exchanges, and multi-layered encryption that danced on the edge of mathematical impossibility. Each breakthrough felt like a victory, yet it was paired with an unsettling realization: every new line of code could be broken, every lock eventually picked by a skillful intruder. They understood that perfection was an illusion, and in this game of cat and mouse, the line between defender and attacker blurred endlessly. A sense of unease grew, a recognition that these efforts, while formidable, might only be temporary shields. Governments and corporations tightened thresholds, raised fences of scrutiny, and heightened manual security protocols that demanded sacrifices: privacy, convenience, efficiency. Every layer added was another step away from the trust built on the simplicity of vulnerability. Yet, the more they tried to fortify themselves, the more cracks appeared, unnoticed by those who believed their defenses were unbreakable. Across the globe, the echo of these efforts reached into the darkest corners, places where chaos and ambition collided. Hackers and clandestine groups, sensing the tightening noose, accelerated their own innovations. They adapted, used proxies, turned to old methods of obfuscation long deemed obsolete, knowing that the fortress wall was uneven and vulnerable at the weakest point, the human factor. In clandestine centers, new techniques emerged: social engineering, impersonation, distraction, simple, direct, relentless. Amid this escalating arms race, a question lingered: will these layered efforts truly hold back the tide? Or were they merely a prelude to further complications, a false sense of security in an ocean of chaos? Each step taken to secure what was precious only drew more attention, more aggression, more ingenuity from those who thrived in the shadows. The narrative woven through these relentless efforts painted a haunting picture: a world that refused to surrender to darkness, yet was constantly on the brink of slipping into it. The ancient art of manual checks, combined with cutting-edge cryptography, created a fragile balancing act, an illusion of safety that could dissolve in an instant. It was a dance of desperation and defiance, with no clear end in sight. And as the night fell again, a flicker of doubt flickered among the defenders. Could their layered defenses withstand the relentless, evolving threat? Or were they merely delaying the inevitable, setting the stage for a new chaos, one born not of digital failure, but of human fallibility, hubris, and the relentless pursuit of control in a world that refuses to be tamed? The question hung like a shadow over all. They had tried everything, yet the darkness still teased just beyond reach, waiting to see how far they would go to protect what was slipping away. In the aftermath of chaos, as the digital abyss recedes into echoes of what once was, there emerges a fragile glimmer of hope. Humanity, battered yet unbowed, turns its gaze toward reconstruction, not just of networks and data, but of trust itself. The air is thick with a silent determination, a collective will that refuses to let the darkness consume all that remains. New encryption methods begin to take shape, born from the ashes of betrayal and collapse. They twist and weave through the digital landscape like resilient vines, complex and unbreakable, promising to guard what's left of fractured identities. These cryptographic innovations are not merely technical. They are symbols of renewed faith in a world where secrets and truths vie for survival. Across continents, governments, corporations, and communities rally around a common cause: to forge a new shield against future assaults. Massive initiatives emerge: global cyber resilience programs designed to fortify infrastructure, to foster transparency, and to democratize security. Cyber watchdogs, once exclusive and obscure, now become watchdogs in broad daylight. They monitor, they predict, they learn from every glitch, every breach, every failure. It's an relentless pursuit of resilience, a testament to the human instinct for survival against the relentless tide of chaos. Schools teach cyber literacy as if it were a civic duty, children being woven into the tapestry of this new digital frontier. In this world, knowledge becomes the armor and awareness the sword. Society itself begins to adapt, transforming, evolving. The digital once again permeates daily life, but with a cautious reverence, a new awareness of vulnerability. People reshaped their relationship with technology, understanding that trust must be nurtured and earned, not assumed. Scrutiny becomes the new currency. Trust, once blind, is now a carefully cultivated compendium of verified truths and resilient connections. Humans start to rebuild not just lockers of data but relationships, real, tangible, fragile yet fiercely protected. They realize that true strength isn't built on the invincibility of code, but on the collective commitment to integrity and resilience. Yet, beneath this mosaic of hope, questions pulse like distant thunder. Are these measures enough? Will the lessons learned from the devastation ingrain themselves deeply enough into all who wield power and those who rely on their protections? Or will cracks still emerge, subtle, unnoticed, waiting to fracture the fragile peace? The scars of betrayal aren't erased by encryption alone. They linger in the collective consciousness, whispering that vigilance must be an ongoing state, not a passive shield. Every new protocol, every signed agreement, and every redundant system is a reminder that humanity's vulnerability is an unending shadow, ever present, ever lurking. As the world stitches itself back together, a haunting thought persists. Will this cycle of destruction and reconstruction become the new normal? Could the lessons of this dark chapter embed themselves into the fabric of our digital lives? Or will arrogance forge anew the roads to vulnerability? The narrative hangs in the balance, a suspenseful question echoing through the corridors of innovation and fear. Will we emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient, or are we doomed to dance perpetually on the edge of catastrophe, perpetually rebuilding from the ruins of our own making? And in these quiet moments of reflection, beneath the hum of servers and the flicker of screens, the question remains, what's next? The future is uncertain, yet one thing is undeniably clear. Humanity's relentless drive to restore, to innovate, to connect, despite the scars, embodies an indomitable spirit. Even after the shadows, there is a flicker of dawn, after the fall, the rise. The reconstruction is not merely of infrastructure but of hope itself. But whether this hope will be enough to stave off the next surge of darkness remains to be seen. The echoes of what was, and what could be, whisper promises of resilience and peril alike. The story continues, woven through time, risk, and the unyielding pulse of human resolve, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. In the cold silence of a dimly lit conference room, the faint hum of servers echoed in the background. Experts in cybersecurity sat hunched over their laptops, their faces illuminated by the glow of encrypted screens. They spoke in hushed tones about the fragile balance between trust and vulnerability, about the unseen war waging behind digital fortresses. The world outside, oblivious to the constant threat, continued to spin, its reliance on encryption growing like a double-edged blade. One voice, deep and gravelly, broke the murmurs. We must remember, it warned, that encryption isn't invincible. It's a shield, fragile and reversible if not maintained properly. The group nodded in solemn agreement, knowing all too well that in the shadows of the internet, adversaries lurk, seeking any crack in the armor to breach sanctuaries of data. Across town, in a more clandestine environment, a different discussion unfolded. Cybercriminals and hackers exchanged whispers, plans forged in the dark, exploiting overlooked vulnerabilities. They saw encryption not as a barrier but as a challenge to overcome. Their goal was not only to breach systems but to understand their weaknesses, to test the resilience of the digital defenses so many believed impenetrable. Meanwhile, policymakers grappled with the growing complexity of digital security. They debated fiercely over the boundaries of privacy and surveillance, knowing that every backdoor created to aid law enforcement could potentially be exploited by malicious actors. The delicate dance between protection and compromise threatened to unravel the digital fabric that held modern society together. The screen flickered, revealing images of cities lit up by millions of interconnected devices, smart homes, financial systems, healthcare networks, all communicating across encrypted channels. Yet, beneath this interconnected web, there was an unsettling undertone. The more dependent society became on encryption for stability, the more it exposed itself to catastrophic failure should those systems collapse or be compromised. In a quiet, reflective tone, a voice narrated, What does this scenario teach us about safeguarding our digital future? It's a lesson in resilience. Encryption is essential. Nothing safeguards our information quite like it. But reliance without understanding breeds complacency. The narration paused, emphasizing the gravity of the message. Digital resilience requires a multifaceted approach, continuous innovation, rigorous testing, and a recognition that trust must be earned, not assumed. Images of outdated hardware, neglected security updates, and people ignoring warnings flashed across the screen. These serve as cautionary symbols of neglect, reminders that even the strongest encryption can falter when left unprotected or misunderstood. The narrative underscored that in the quest for invulnerability, complacency is the most destructive enemy. The scene shifts to a solitary figure, an expert deep in thought, staring at lines of code on a large screen. They understand that encryption is simply one part of a broader puzzle. True cybersecurity involves a layered defense, a constant vigilance to adapt to new threats that emerge from the shadows of the digital world. As the scene fades out, the voice returns, more contemplative. The future is a puzzle, each piece a decision, each vulnerability a potential ruin. We safeguard ourselves not just with encryption but with awareness and proactive resilience. For without them, even the strongest digital castle is a house of cards, destined to fall at the first gust of chaos. The camera slowly pulls back, revealing a world asleep, unaware that beneath their routine lives, a fragile digital foundation holds everything together. The echo of this truth lingers, a haunting reminder that our reliance on encryption carries weight, and with it, immense responsibility. Because what we choose to trust today shapes the stability of our digital world tomorrow. The question remains: how much resilience are we willing to build into our future before the cracks become unavoidable? The story doesn't end here. It's only the beginning of the ongoing struggle to protect what we often take for granted, in a digital age where chaos can emerge silently, devastatingly, from the shadows. The world had never witnessed a collapse of security on such a scale, an upheaval that reverberated through every layer of society. After that devastating breach, trust was shattered, pixel by pixel, like a mirror fractured into countless shards. The digital age, once a realm of limitless potential, now hovered on the edge of an abyss. Those who survived and thrived in this new world found themselves caught between a relentless pursuit of safety and the haunting realization that perhaps all security was now mere illusion. In the wake of the chaos, the architects of the digital future scrambled to rebuild, but not as they once were. New security protocols emerged, stricter, more layered, more invasive, crafted as a response to a vulnerability that had nearly consumed humanity. Governments, corporations, even the average individual began to adopt these new shields: biometric authentication, dynamic encryption that evolved faster than hackers could adapt, surveillance systems that transcended privacy boundaries in the name of protection. The line between safety and invasion blurred, a thin, wavering border that society was forced to cross every day. Everywhere, society visibly shifted. Cities grew quieter in their digital interactions, the once seamless exchange of information now crippled with complex hurdles designed to deter breaches. Privacy, once a fundamental right, was now a privilege, hard-won and fragile. People talked less about secrets and more about safety. Trust was a currency so depleted that many hesitated even to believe their own echoes, unsure whether what they heard was genuine or manipulated. In this altered landscape, perceptions of privacy had fundamentally changed. The concept that you could hide what you wanted from the world was nearly extinct. Instead, the new narrative was about transparency, an uncomfortable honesty that was built into the software we relied upon. Sharing, once voluntary, was now mandated in many institutions, a consequence of the relentless drive to prevent another breach. Blackout moments appeared, temporary as they were, where entire networks would vanish, leaving only whispers of our digital footprints, an ominous reminder that even the most sophisticated protections could falter. As we delve deeper into this future, a haunting question settles over all of us. Will encryption ever be trusted again? Or are we walking into an era where perpetual vulnerability is the new normal? The thickening fog of doubt clouds our minds. Every device, every transmission, every secret we once protected, the walls feel less like defenses and more like invitations for intrusion. The very foundation of privacy has been rewritten. We are now governed by a paradox: the desire for security battling the inevitable loss of control. Throughout these new norms, a subtle but palpable shift in human behavior unfolds. People become more guarded, their interactions fraught with suspicion. Conversations are encrypted, transactions unverifiable until they are completed. Friendships, once simple expressions of trust, now include encrypted messages and double-layered identities. The community we once knew, flat and open, has been reshaped into a labyrinth of guarded digital selves. And yet, amid the paranoia and relentless scrutiny, some remnants of hope flicker. In the shadows, a resistance sprouts. A clandestine network of individuals dedicated to unmasking these new, invasive protocols, those who refuse to accept the erasure of privacy as an inevitable cost of security. They question whether solutions driven by fear can ever truly foster freedom. Their whispers are carried on encrypted channels, their actions deliberate and secretive. They seek to test the limits, to find cracks in the armor of the new protocols, believing that trust, once broken, is not necessarily lost forever. As society struggles to adapt to this brutal new normal, the question persists: are we truly safer? Or are we merely resigned to accept a perpetual state of vulnerability, the digital age's own Pandora's box? The more we try to lock ourselves into fortresses of security, the more we realize that every lock may come with a key that can be stolen, every shield pierced by unseen hands. We are caught in an endless dance, an intricate choreography between safety and exposure, between certainty and doubt. The horizon grows darker with each passing day. The hope of restoring absolute trust seems distant, perhaps unreachable. The echoes of the past, when privacy was a right, when encryption was unbreakable, resound faintly, reminding us of what once was and what may never be again. The trust, the belief that our secrets are safe, is now a fragile relic buried beneath layers of code and suspicion. As we stand on the precipice of this new era, one thing becomes painfully clear: the age of absolute security has come and gone. We are now navigating through a perpetual twilight, where shadows of doubt lurk behind every digital corner. Whether encryption can ever be trusted again remains an open question, a specter lingering in the minds of those brave, or foolish, enough to believe that a truly secure age might still be possible. But in this world, where vulnerability seems woven into the fabric of existence, perhaps the only true security left is our shared acknowledgement of that vulnerability, a collective acceptance that, in the end, trust may be the rarest commodity of all.